we're going to come back together really quickly and kind of debrief what we are gaining or what the purpose of both of those team building activities were. So we shared that one of the main rationales for team building activities was to practice social emotional skills. So I want us to kind of think about what social emotional skills are demonstrated or practiced in imaginary volleyball versus the maze. And if there's any that are for both, I'll kind of make a spot here in the middle.
Cooperation.
In which one? For the maze? Great.
For the imaginary volleyball, depending on how your kids are, I would think healthy competition.
Okay.
I think being supportive when somebody like messes up.
For which?
For either.
For both? Okay, so I'm gonna just make another area down here. I'm sorry, what did you say?
Feeling like supported when somebody messes up or supporting you.
Like mistakes are okay. I'm just gonna say mistakes are okay.
Yeah, that's good.
How about, I think the maze is a little bit more communication.
Until you told us we couldn't talk.
Well, but it's strategic types of communication, right?
Different kind of communication,
But
right?
What communication skill is practiced in imaginary volleyball?
Memory recall.
Yeah.
Of what?
People's names.
Names,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Recall. How important is recalling names when you're in a business scenario or you're a teacher or any kind of job and you're trying to make an impression, right? It's impressive when you know people's names quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Other types of social emotional skills for one or the other, or both.
For the maze, everybody had to get finished. So it would be, how do you put that? It was, yes.
Because think about just for a second, Katie. If we had just Nick, if we just had you go through it and you were successful, and everyone else was sitting watching, how would that make the rest of the group feel? I mean, they might have helped you get through it, but they're not really active participants. You know, so the fact that, okay, Nick got through, now he's on the cold lava, but now the rest of the group's got to get, from over here by the hot lava to the cold lava, and, you can be a help in that process to them, so.
Right, and then the other thing about the maze is using people's strengths. So the thing I noticed right away was that she made a chart on her paper, and she copied down what the maze looked like so she could put X's on the squares that were wrong and help everybody keep track. So she immediately became one of the leaders in that activity. So I think the maze is really good about capitalizing on strengths. So if those of you who just joined us, we're just thinking about what social emotional skills are practiced in either activity.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this one, Katie. Mm-hmm. What do you all think of, and we talked about recalling names, but what about strategic communication over here? What do you think about that? You have to remember names, but how do you have to communicate those names?
You had to say them, and it got to one point where I noticed our team was almost doing the same thing over and over. There being repetitions at one point.
Mm-hmm. And I noticed, hold that thought. I noticed on this, the team on this side, you remember a couple of times you guys kind of mixed it up. And I remember the look on your face one time it came, you weren't quite ready, and it was like, oh, and then you was like to Nick or whoever it was, and you were like, oh, I wasn't, you kind of changed up the pattern. Other things about strategic communication on that one?
But then and also volleyball, because they did one person twice because you didn't say it.
Right.
It sort of shows a thing of thinking outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I'm blocked. Let's go outside the box.
Yeah. And the one thing I want to say I appreciate, because you guys called me on it, and that was good because I had laid out the expectations, and you were like, well, you didn't tell us we couldn't do that, so you're right. You guys were thinking outside the box, and I said, yep, keep right on playing. So that's important for kids to let them be creative.
How about one of the other rationales for team building, which is exercising creativity? What kind of creativity did we witness?
With the volleyball?
Either one.
I thought it was cool how we each tried to hit the ball in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I think certain kids are gonna get really creative with that. even their faces.
Well, and I saw some of you like digging it, you know, and it, over the back, and I was like, wow, they're really getting creative here. And you know, kids will do the same thing. They'll have fun with that.
Well, for the maze, coming up with sounds that people say.
That was cool. Very cool.
I think with volleyball, it would be like, for us, it worked out numbers wise to make sure we said each person's name before we put it over. But if you had a group of like 10 and 10 or 8 and 8, when you wouldn't have to say everybody's name, to really try to include everybody though and not say the same names the whole time. Because otherwise you're going to have 5 kids standing there not doing anything
Right.
and not feeling like a part of the group.
Great point.
That's kind of what I was thinking about with the maze. Like, I was tuned out until I knew I had to go up there. So until she figured it out, I was over here eating my salad. Sorry. I was tuned
Sorry.
out. And I'm thinking, if there are a lot of kids,
Mm-hmm.
then there was too much time to tune out on that.
Yeah.
But
You have to have a small group.
But then that's a good social skill because that means that even though it is not your turn, because it's turn taking, which is a social skill,
Mm-hmm.
you still have to pay attention
Right.
and be prepared.
And I think too, like at this point in the year, we're starting to know kids' strengths and weaknesses. So if you know you have a kid that's going to tune out until they really need to pay attention, you make them the buzzer. So they have to be the one that decides if people are going through the maze.
Oh, that's great.
Sorry,
point.
Nick.
Not that also you're making it easy for us because we were all tired, but normally for all the kids, you would have them, every time they got wrong, the next student would try, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Not
that
the
would
same
be-
person.
That's-
That's a good. I would. Yeah.
That's a great adjustment. No, I like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again.
And then the other thing too is if you remember in volleyball, back to your point, Sandy, right? So make sure, yeah, you didn't have time to not be engaged in volleyball because as you guys got into it, when they did their 3 and hit it was coming like within about 6 or 7 seconds. It was back on your side, so you couldn't like, oh, I'm going to take a break and relax. It was like it was coming back, and you're like, now I got to get it to my teammates. So you're right. That's a good way to keep. And you could do that. I mean, you could even if you had 24 kids, you could have. Like you could have set up teams of 5 or 6, and they could just do it really quickly. Or you could have a couple of those. If you move desk in your classroom, you could have a couple of games going on at the same time. So to get kids engaged.
And then the kids like to so for example, if someone's not paying attention, I know the kids, they'll look and say their name so they could get stuck and their team will win.
Yeah.
So they're like paying attention then to see who's not like doing something.
Yeah.
So like if we're reading and they're popcorning, they make sure to pick those who they're like, wait, he's not paying attention. So even though it's like bad, but it puts everyone on point, like, okay, I need to like get
And I noticed that. What did you do when we first started volleyball? You were like, "Oop, taking the name tag off." Now I don't know. Was that strategic to the other team or your own team? Like they.
Would have been, it was for our team.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, because Debbie wasn't here, sorry Debbie, love you though. She wasn't here, she doesn't know everybody. So if you notice when it first started out, a lot of us was hitting it to Debbie.
I did. I watched that. That was a good point. But Debbie got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the types of things you should think about as a teacher before you start doing team building activities. So what skills are being practiced, what are they going to get out of it, etc. So we're not just playing games just to play games or doing team building activity just to pass the time. We want to make sure that the kids are always getting something out of it. So we're transitioning now into the second half of our session, which is centered around mindfulness or meditation and how that might help students with stress or just to be a little more aware of their surroundings and what they're learning, goal setting, etc. All the things we talk to students about really frequently. So before we do the video, we're going to talk just touch briefly on what we already know on mindfulness. So whether you're aware of it or not, you've probably helped students with mindfulness. Are there specific examples you can give, whether in advisory or in general ed classrooms, of how we teach mindfulness, how we talk or model mindfulness with students?
I know one of the things that when a student is giving a presentation or something and they get stuck or they keep having to go over, I just say stop, take a deep breath, let it out. And it's sort of like a little mini one, just to calm them down, and then they get to start over.
come in and we did a guided meditation. And so we had like the lights turned off and candles lit, and then afterwards it was kind of our kickoff for the quarter, and then afterwards we had some goal setting things, you know, in school, things at home in your life that you would like to see happen by the end of the quarter.
Great. So you brought somebody in from the outside. Fantastic. What about something as simple as wait time, right? So that's something we talk about a lot, like making sure the class is quiet and everybody has a chance to think and reflect upon the question before you start calling on people. So it's, you know, that's something as we become master teachers, we start to think about wait time. And I think that in itself is a little branch of mindfulness, like encouraging each student to just breathe and at least attempt to solve the problem or come up with a solution. Mm-hmm.
I actually took the idea from Alma last year when the kids were rowdy.
Mm-hmm.
When they came into the class, we had like 2 minutes of just meditation time.
Mm.
And it worked in her class, so then I'm like, let's try it.
Mm-hmm.
And it does, it like calms them down. They start to think, they relax. And then it's like after 2 minutes, we breathe, and then we just start.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done it in a while, but it definitely does work.
Right.
You know, another thought came to my mind about, Katie was talking about wait time, but I'm sure all of you, like when you've done activities in your class and you want to do a debrief period and you want kids to think about it before they respond, or maybe you're doing some kind of writing, maybe in their journal or whatever. That's another way that we can kind of practice mindfulness to say, okay, back to your point, let's just take a couple of minutes and let's everybody just be really quiet. Let's kind of debrief and let's in our mind think about what did we just get accomplished in this math lesson or whatever it is that you're teaching before we, start to talk about it or write about it. That's another way that we can kind of practice being mindful as well in the classroom.
When I was a teacher and I took my kids to the computer lab, I actually turned the lights off several of the times when they were working in the lab. And it was a room without windows, I remember, so it was really dark in there. And of course they could still work because there was light coming from the screens. And it was like a no talking policy. I actually made them send me an email if they had to go to the bathroom. And I would like walk over and tap them like gently on the shoulder and let them go. And it's like a different type of mindfulness because there's a little distraction, of course, if they're working and they're on the computer. But I think that type of dark and quiet environment is sometimes shocking for our students because they don't ever get to do that. And as an adult, that's how I work quite a bit. I like for it to be dark and quiet and peaceful, even if I do have a computer. So it's a different type of mindfulness, but it's still my own little branch that I practiced when I was a teacher. So thanks everyone for that. We are going to start with a video. This is a TED Talk with Amy Burke. While we watch this, we're going to ask you to take notes in 3 columns. So if you could, in whatever notebook or paper, and we have extra lined paper here if anybody wants that. Sorry. Go ahead and pass that down. Okay, and we're going to be taking notes in these 3 columns. So, yes, I agree with this. No, this makes me nervous, confused, or I disagree with this statement, or questions that you have. So whatever she says in the TED Talk or whatever connection you might make to the TED Talk, try and put it in 3 different columns if it's something that fits within that category. Make sense? Well, she's really Canadian, isn't she? Anybody else notice that? Okay, so does anybody want, or is anybody willing to share one of the items from a yes, a no, or a question? Why don't we start with yeses? What types of things made us say yes, or I agree with this?
When she said shifting focus to the pursuit of education, moment by moment.
The pursuit of education moment by moment. For sure, because all of what our conversations on how do we prepare kids for the future, how do we prepare kids for the future, college, career, 21st century skills, but never do we ask the question like, what does this 7th grader need to be able to do now as a 7th grader, or now as an October, fall of a 7th grade year type of thing. Great. Other yeses? Yep.
Educating not just the brain but the heart as well.
Mm-hmm.
So learning about respect, what that brings, or just learning about loving each other.
Exactly. So, and I think the quote is, I'm not going to be exactly right, but an integrated human capable of dealing with life as a whole. So being able to persevere, being able to love each other, being able to cooperate with each other, etc. Being able to succeed in a personal relationship. That's something not a lot of kids that I've taught have a lot of good role models for, or a lot of great experience with. And we know it's not easy to have a friend for a decade or be in a marriage or any of those things. It's something that it takes work and time, and something that's dealing with life as a whole. That's part of that. Yep.
Creating relationships, deep learning occurs. When creating relationships, deep learning occurs.
Exactly. The first thing she said was, I didn't really know my kids as people. And I think a lot of beginning teachers really think about their kids as kids. My kids are students. My kids will do this. My kids will do that. But they're little tiny humans with little tiny human problems, or sometimes big problems. But they're people, and we need to know who they are as individuals and as people, who they are now, before we can figure out where they're going to go. How about things that we disagreed with, things we said no to? And kind of glancing around, I see that column is not very full on a lot of people's papers, which is probably a good thing.
I was thinking about the whole implementing it, and when she said she had a little chime or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I thought about was, oh my gosh, somebody's gonna accuse me of trying to convert their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Something, Buddhist or something.
Right.
But that was the first thought.
Yeah, or, I mean, if you walked into your class tomorrow, how many of you could honestly say that I'm going to step into my 7th grade class and I'm going to, for the first minute, I'm going to encourage them to take a breath?
Yeah.
It's going to start with giggles, isn't it? It's going to start with giggles. It's going to start with, I mean, it's not going to work right away, is it?
I use a chime.
Oh, good.
I have my phone for a chime. It's great. I have one in my classroom.
I'm figuring about their transitions, and
Mhm.
we do.
So can you speak to how long it took to get there?
It depends. Most of our kids come from the Montessori school, so they have
Right.
a background. But but even with that, there are a variety of Montessori schools in this district, and there are some kids that come that don't have Montessori background. And I think it's like anything. You have to get some kids to buy in,
Mm-hmm.
and once you have some kids who have bought in, others are going to start to take notice.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. It takes time. I mean, we have 20 minutes of silence in our class every single day.
Mhm.
Lights off. Kids are journaling. Kids are having their own meditation. It's a powerful thing, and it's not an issue anymore.
Right.
In the beginning of the year, it's a challenge.
But the buy-in is huge.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt, but we talk about, Native Americans have, in a variety of groups, have some sort of vision quest, and how the young person moves to adulthood and they have to kind of find themselves. And in one kind of iteration, a young person has their belongings and they go off by themselves, alone, without other people around them, and they have to find a place where no one is, that they've never been, and they have to kind of wait for that voice inside. And so there's so much evidence, and kids will attest to, that they are on the phone and the TV and the computer at the same time, and that they're scheduled. They've got sports and music and dance, and they're taking care of their cousins, and their parents aren't home, and they're getting dinner started, and they're busy. And so even though we're not going to pack them up, and we'd like to, and sometimes we do get to do this part outside, but we want to make sure that we're conscious that we have some silent time without those distractions, so that we can listen to that voice that is going to help us move into adulthood, and that that we take a page from the Native Americans who did this quest, and that how can we make this real for us. And it's not always perfect, and sometimes we have to help them, because how long can you be in a sustained reflection? I think that can depend on your maturity and practice. And we have to coach each other about, like, silent isn't like still talking across the room. Mm-hmm. And we wish you could be in always outside. So when we're outside, we say you have to not be able to touch any person. and we've got trees around and all that. But when we're in the classroom, we're packed in there. We're tight. There's a lot of kids, and so it's an especially challenging thing that we're asking them to pretend that they're not there, and to have that reflection. But it is powerful, and I think it's doable.
I know, I totally get that. I mean, I had zero Montessori background at all until I came to Clark, and so I remember walking in and thinking, man, some of this stuff's kind of hokey. But it's when you see it happening and you see the impact it has, it really does change your viewpoint. And until you see it, you might be like, that sounds crazy and that would never happen in my classroom. But it can, and it can if you're doing it. And I think it goes to one of the things that I said I agreed with that she was saying was we need to teach kids how their minds work. And there's a lot of that. There's, in adolescence, how their frontal lobe works, helping them understand why they don't have impulse control and how they need to learn to deal with that. But then also that their brain needs to relax and reflect and how we process things and make connections. And it helps them to have the buy-in and to understand.
The whole school does this? So the school shuts down for 20 minutes pretty much, kind of.
It's at a variety of times. So for ours, we do ours every day from 12:50 to 1:10.
So not everybody does it at the same
It's
time?
not all at the same time.
Well, just because we're all like a
in your
school at
classroom.
different schedules, so just it might fall in a different spot for
Well,
different people.
and it sounds too like it's not necessarily shutting down because they're still doing work during that time. It's just silent, right? No, I thought you mentioned it was journaling.
They might
Sorry.
journal,
Oh.
but they might
do
do
a reflection.
So, but it's their so it's their time to decide what they want to do.
They're not allowed to do academic work at the time.
Okay. Interesting.
That's so cool.
That's great.
Even though I don't have anything to know, to me, the overall was it's actually two things, but when she said connecting to yourself helps you connect to others, that made me think of I heard when I was growing up, if you don't love yourself, how are you gonna love somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And then that one, being able to respond to what is going on
Mm-hmm.
instead of reacting to what is going on. And that is a very important life skill that our students do not have. And that's something that they really need to learn.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, and I'll leave you, the third column was questions, so I'll leave you to kind of research and think about those on your own as we get closer to being short on time.
So you want me to adjust, segue into this?
Do you want me to go over the brain science? Or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
So, a couple of slides regarding the research as part of this. So, these students who practice mindfulness in schools have shown significant improvements in paying attention, in self-control, in classroom participation, in respect for others, and decreased symptoms of depression and ADHD. So these are, I think we probably know this as adults that may practice mindfulness, but research shows that these are the types of improvements that you'll see in students if they have significant time to practice mindfulness within their day. And of course, you know that these improvements could continue after the end of the program. So it's not like, oh, I've improved in mindfulness, now it's June and I'm not going to do it anymore. These kids continue to grow and improve if they have that foundation. There's also a lot of brain science behind this. So meditation actually changes your brain. It increases the gray matter to areas responsible for learning and memory, and it decreases the gray matter in areas responsible for anxiety and stress. So again, we know with a lot of kids who have grown up in tumultuous backgrounds, particularly in grades 0 to 5, they have a lot of anxiety and stress. And so mindfulness, encouraging them to be mindful is one way to definitely change the actual physical makeup of their brain. So we're gonna try out. We're just gonna do the seated meditation as we move forward here. So John, I think, is gonna lead us through this exercise.
Okay. So here's kind of give you the context. We want you all to experience this, and then we're going to debrief it. We'd like you to. This is going to be a seated mindfulness activity or seated meditation process. So we want you to move to somewhere in the room, or you can stay in your seat, but we'd like to do it seated. If you choose to If you're a yoga person, you want to sit on the floor, that's totally okay. And we're going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And I'm going to read a script to you and kind of walk you through that script, and then I'm going to be quiet for the remainder of the 5 minutes. And we're going to turn the lights down, and then we're going to debrief after that 5 minutes. Okay? So I'll let you guys choose before I start the script where you want to, if you want to stay where you're seated, if you want to sit on the floor, whatever you're going to do. Katie and I are going to participate too once I get through the script. So I'll let you guys choose that. And you want to start our timer, Katie?
Yep.
Okay. So let's move into our mindfulness bodies together. Sit nice and tall with straight backs. Bring your body to stillness. Close your eyes. Katie, can you turn lights down, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's start by taking a scan of our bodies. Just noticing how every part of our bodies, how your bodies are feeling today. Start with your head, noticing any pains, tension, or pleasant sensations you might be having. Notice everything on your face. Relax the space between your eyes. Let your jaw relax, allowing the tongue to move away from the top of your mouth. Feel your shoulders drop down your back and away from your ears. Bring your attention to your back, your chest, your stomach, just noticing how your body feels in this very moment. Scan your hips, down your legs, into your ankles, your feet, and your toes. Feel the ground underneath your feet. Now let's begin to focus on breathing. Don't change your breathing, just draw your attention to your natural breath and count. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Until you reach 10 and then start over again. If you find yourself getting distracted, don't worry about it. Just come back to noticing and counting your inhales and exhales 1 to 10. Now we'd like you to use the rest of your 5 minutes to just sit in silence and continue to count your breaths if you find that to be helpful to you. Okay. So the question I'd like to kind of pose to you to think about and ponder on is, first of all, how did it feel to sit quiet for that amount of time? And when was the last time you actually did that yourself, where you just sat 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and you were in quiet reflection? So first of all, the first question, how did it feel just to sit and be quiet? Who'd like to start? What did that feel like to you? You're smiling. That's a good thing.
No, I probably felt fine, but
Yeah.
do it every day.
That's great. Good.
It was relaxing, but I was starting to fall asleep.
It's okay.
Because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'll ask the question again. Remember when I at the beginning of our session about how many people had done yoga? I think about, so I get to do that in a yoga class, but what's interesting is that I've never felt like maybe I'm going to fall asleep. I start to really relax, but if you've really worked in a yoga class, you have that, it's that good feeling of working and your body's kind of a little bit tired and fatigued, but it's like, it's kind of nice just to and kind of cool your body down. So when was the last time, I know someone said, I kind of do that on a regular basis, but like in the last week that you've actually sat and been really quiet with yourself? I know you guys do it at school, but let's say like outside of work, in your own life, Do you?
Yeah.
That's great.
That's something because I know that if I go home on those days that I do, and it's a rare occasion now, and I've got things in my head and everything, I will actually dream about that day or dream about stuff that I have to do. Whereas I'm like, okay, we need to stop, we need to relax, because if I don't do that, then I really don't get the sleep I need and the rest I need, and I wake up the next morning not rested because my body fully did not rest.
That's great. Yeah.
We used to do yoga after school on Fridays, a group of the teachers, and we would just do it in one of the classrooms. And I could tell, my husband could tell the difference in the weekends that I did yoga and the weekends that I didn't. It was like, I came home and I would just let go of some of like the stress of school.
Right.
And so we don't do it anymore.
Okay. You said you do it all the time. How does that impact you? It sounds like you've got it into more of a kind of a ritual routine in your life. So how does that help
Well, as a practicing psychologist, I have taught meditation for many years, and I do it myself. Otherwise, I'd probably be a much more high-strung, difficult person than Lawson.
Great. That's good. Anything else? As you kind of experience this?
I think I need it. Because I'm like very catty now with my kids. Because of all the stuff that we have to do. So I feel like just like they need it, we need it.
Did you notice that one of the things we talked about, Katie had up there about kids who have ADHD? Well, just because we become adults doesn't mean it goes away.
No,
We have adults with ADHD, right? And so, I think about that process that, it really helps those adults who have trouble focusing and get distracted easily. And maybe you work with people like that. Maybe you're like that. I don't know. But as I was going through this and I was reflecting, sitting there being quiet, I was thinking about at work, like, how much more productive and more effective can I be in my work with colleagues if I even take the time, even if it's at lunchtime, to take 5 minutes of my lunchtime for me and just have that quiet time? And then will I be a better teammate, a better team player in the afternoon because I've kind of cleared my head and kind of rejuvenated myself? So, other thoughts?
No, I mean, I need to do it more as well. I need to be a better practitioner, of course. And I really think that we can get there with our kids. It just starts with manageable chunks. So what can you do successfully within the next week? And then build from there. We're not going to get to from 0 minutes a day to 20 minutes every day. And in a week. So we have to think about what we can do to make it happen and just make our kids stop and think reasonably. Up here, there are some links and mindfulness resources and tips that you can use. There's even one about mindful schools, so it includes different types of tips and activities that you can do with your kids in the school. Mm-hmm.
Are there any we can, do you have any to show the kids?
Show the kids.
Yeah, are there any that you can
I believe there's some in here, yes. And these will be posted on the Google site for you guys to look through.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know, you might not have access? Okay. Okay, we can make sure you get access. But these will be posted on the Google site for you to look through. But I just wanted to point out that they're here for you guys. So we've talked about other resources and tips that we might go through here. So trying a mindfulness 1 minute break. So again, we're not going up to 20 minutes right away. Try for 1 minute. Try turning the lights off. And it might not be, you got to think about when it's good for your class. So it might be right when they walk in. It might be a transition between one activity and another. It might be the last minute. It might be during advocacy or advisory. It might be during your core foundation time. Trying a 1 minute break might work. Using a chime or another pleasant sound, we've talked about that. There are free chimes on the internet if you can just play the audio. You don't need to go buying chimes. Explaining the benefits in the brain research to students. So thinking about how the brain is impacted, showing them, showing 7th and 8th graders, this is how your brain changes when you do this. It's physical science. It's not just hokey pokey. I think that you should do this. It actually has a foundation in scientific fact, and then they get to learn about that.
If you want to show like your students something, PBS has something. It's several years old, but it's still good. Called Teenage Brain. What is it? Something the Teenage Brain. I'm sure if you Google Teenage Brain with PBS, and they have them in little segments, and you could show little bits to the students, and it's all about from the science perspective of how your brain develops, and it's not just mindfulness really. It's about decision making and impulse and a lot of things.
Thank you. And you said it was PBS?
Yes.
And then certainly explaining to the students that it's a practice or that it's a practice that gets easier over time. They're not going to be experts at it at first. And let them fail, let them try it, fail, get better at it, etc. Just like team building activities, it's something that they need to work toward. So now it's time for reflection and evaluation for today's session. So you should have access to the Google site. And if you could share something that you learned today and think about appreciations.